The LG V50 ThinQ is the first phone from LG that supports 5G, and that means you can use it to connect to the next-gen network and access super fast download speeds. Think downloading a 2GB game in just 25 seconds. Now, the V50 is a good phone, but is it worth the more than $1,000 asking price? Well, let's find out. First off, what do I like about the LG V50 ThinQ? Well, it's the screen. It's got an OLED display, it's 3120 by 1440 resolution, so it looks nice and sharp. It's colorful, and it also is easy to read in broad daylight. So no real complaints there. It's a really good screen to view content on. I do wish LG had played around with the design a little more. We're seeing the notch fade out now as phones come out with hole punch cameras and pop-up cameras like OnePlus and Samsung phones. So it would have been nice to see something different there rather than exactly the same as what we saw on the LG V40 ThinQ. The front is protected by Gorilla Glass 5. And the rear is protected by Gorilla Glass 6. Now, a couple of changes are on the back design. It's still very similar to the V40, but you can see a god-awful 5G logo at the top, which I really don't like because it lights up yellow when you're connected to 5G. And I really don't need to tell the world that I'm connected to 5G, so I really hope that this is removed for future 5G phones from LG. Now, one other thing that I really like is what they did with the camera module, and they also did this with the LG G8. They basically removed the housing and made it so that it sits flush with the rear glass, so it looks like it's just sitting right under that glass with no other extra flourishes or modules surrounding it. It looks really nice, really elegant, and I really like that. If you're an audiophile, the V50 is a dream come true. There's a 32-bit quad DAC, there is stereo speakers, which are amplified by the boombox feature that LG introduced last year. Basically, you can place it on certain surfaces and it'll amplify the sound, and it sounds pretty good too. Now, there's also support for high-res audio formats, as well as aptX HD, DTS-X 3D, and all of that is boosted by the fact that there is a headphone jack, and who doesn't love that? The V50 is a flagship Android phone, so that means it's the same story as any other flagships this year. You're getting the Snapdragon 855 processor, and there's 6 gigs of RAM. That basically means you can throw any game at this thing and it'll be perfectly fine. I threw PUBG Mobile, Fortnite, Paco Forever, Altos, Odyssey, all sorts of games, and the V50 handled it like a pro. I don't think you really have anything to worry about in terms of performance on this phone. The V50 doesn't feel too unwieldy, though I do have large hands, so I might be biased, but it feels comfortable in the hand, and I didn't have too much trouble reaching certain parts of the screen, though I did have to shift my position a little bit. I do like the curved edges on the front and the back, which make it overall feel a little more ergonomic. On paper, you're getting the same exact camera as the LG V40 ThinQ. It's a 12 megapixel standard lens with an f1.5 aperture, a 12 megapixel telephoto lens with an f2.4 aperture, and a 16 megapixel wide-angle lens with an f1.9 aperture. Now, those might be the same specs, but the results are actually quite different because LG has improved the camera software digitally. I didn't like too much of what I got with the LG V40, but with the digital enhancements, I'm enjoying what I'm capturing with the V50. Details are strong, colors are accurate, though it does seem to struggle with HDR or high contrast scenarios. The cameras still struggle with low light, particularly the wide angle and the telephoto lenses, but there is a new feature called Night View in the camera that takes multiple photos, stitches them together, and produces one strong photo. Now, it's actually quite similar to the Pixel's Night Sight feature, except it doesn't use AI as much. And I actually think Pixel's Night Sight is a little bit better, but the LG V50's Night View does a pretty good job of holding up. But the best feature of the camera is the fact that you have those multiple lenses. It's incredibly versatile to be able to switch to a wide-angle lens to get more in your shot, or zoom in with the telephoto lens to 2 times to get a little closer. And I think they all work really well, although I do think the camera app is a little slow, and that could be improved. There are 2 cameras on the front. One is an 8 megapixel f1.9 lens paired with a 5 megapixel f2.2 lens. There's nothing fancy going on here, it's just an extra wide-angle lens, so you can get group selfies if you have multiple people in your shot. Selfies aren't as detailed as I like, and they tend to overexpose in areas with high contrast, but I do like the fact that you have that secondary lens to get a few more people in the shot. Another new feature is video portrait. We saw this on the LG G8. Essentially, it's adding a blur effect around a subject during a video, kind of similar to portrait mode when taking stills. It doesn't really work that well, but it's also not terrible. You can kind of see the blurred and fuzzy looking effect, which makes it really obvious that it's software based. Now, what do I dislike about the V50? Well, the big one is that it's just a bit boring. There's not really any one standout feature, and a lot of it we've seen before on the LG V40 and the LG G8. So really, apart from the fact that it can connect to 5G, which we'll get to in a bit, it just doesn't stand out. There are things I don't really like about the software either. It just feels a little dated. It is running Android 9 Pie, but things like when you install an app and you have to keep telling the app drawer to organize alphabetically every time you install an app, it's kind of annoying. Or in the camera, where you have to go in and customize the UI yourself because LG made a unintuitive camera app. Little things like that make me resent it a little bit, but also the worst offender is the amount of bloatware that's pre-installed. This is the Sprint model, and that one just comes with a whole host of games, some of which you can't uninstall, so that's disappointing. It's a 4,000 mAh battery in the LG V50, but it's also the weakest link in the phone. On 4G LTE, we've been testing it and generally come down to about 30% at the end of the day, and if we plan to take the phone out for a longer period of time later into the night, say going to a bar, then you might potentially end up with a dead phone. It's definitely not a full day of battery with heavy use, but you can definitely get a full day with medium or light usage. Now on 5G, things could be a little different. I tested it for about 4 hours with lots of speed tests and the screen just being on for a long period of time, and the battery dropped to 50% in that time. And really, it's difficult to say whether that's good or bad because that usage is completely different as to what we would normally use the phone for. So we'll have to do further, longer testing when 5G from Sprint specifically comes to New York City. In our own battery test, the phone lasted for 10 hours and 30 minutes, and that's with running a YouTube video on 1080p with max brightness over Wi-Fi. How does that compare with a similar phone? Well, the Galaxy S10 Plus has a 4,100 mAh battery, and it lasted for more than 14 hours. So there are phones out there with better battery life, and they don't cost as much. A couple notes on the V50's 5G. First, it's not interoperable, so that means you won't be able to use the V50 on Sprint and connect it to Verizon's 5G network, and vice versa. You won't be able to use Verizon's V50 on Sprint's 5G network. They'll connect to 4G LTE with no problem. It's just that different carriers are using different 5G spectrum, mid-band for Sprint, for example, millimeter wave for Verizon, and they won't really play well with each other. And that's going to be a common theme with 5G devices going forward. Second, 5G is only available in select areas of select cities, so even if you are in a city, it doesn't mean that you're going to get access to 5G all the time. You can also only buy the V50 in the cities that 5G service is activated. At the end of the day, it comes down to price and access to 5G. Now, on price, the Google Pixel 3, the Galaxy S10, the Galaxy S10e, these are all better overall phones, and they're cheaper too. And on 5G, most people won't really be able to access that 5G network, at least for a few more years. So it really doesn't make sense to shell out so much money for a 5G capable phone. The V50 ThinQ costs $1,152 on Sprint and $1,000 on Verizon, and I think you should skip it. It just really makes no sense to buy a 5G phone right now. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you have any thoughts about the V50, please add them in the comments section. Otherwise, like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications, and head to digitaltrends.com for more.